Clearlook. Can I thank the regionals for bringing forward this important motion. People Before Profit strongly believe we should abolish the means test for carers' allowance. Indeed, we're against means testing, full stop. And I'll talk a bit more about that. But in the case of carers, it is completely unacceptable. Hundreds of thousands of people in this country, out of care and love for children with special needs or disability, family members, the elderly who are unwell or disabled, provide them with care and do the state an enormous service in the process of doing that, which, if it was fully recognised and acknowledged, saves the state billions and billions of euros every year. But Ireland has always done care on the cheap, always, with the use of phrases like vocation. That has become an excuse to pay people who do care of all sorts, or the so-called caring professions, to underpay people, particularly women, or to not pay them at all. And that is absolutely wrong. It was brought home to me recently with a woman I met on the street in Dunleary, who talked about how she'd given up her entire career to look after her children with special needs. She did it out of love. She wasn't sorry that she did it, but she just talked about the daily struggle, the lack of support, some respite, the pressure, the stress of all of that, and the lack of acknowledgement. And although she wasn't citing her own example, she talked about others she knew in a similar situation, where she described the vulnerability that women expose themselves to because of the means testing of disability, of carers' allowance, which may rule them out of it altogether and therefore make them entirely dependent on their partner. And as she put it, she knew of examples of women who had to beg husbands for money for Tampax. Now that is a terrible, terrible position to put women in, to put them in that position of vulnerability. You think about it in situations of possible domestic abuse, that is putting women in a desperate position. And it is precisely why one of the universal payments we have, the children's allowance, was recognised as critical to give a payment directly to women. Directly to women. And there's very, very few people who wouldn't say that was the right thing to do. So this is about the independence and respect of our carers, the majority of whom are women. And the current situation is about trapping them in dependence and in poverty. And that is wrong, and it has to stop. The other critical point is that there's always going to be significant numbers of people on the wrong side of thresholds and of eligibility criteria. And we all know it. And we see example after example. A few euro over and you lose your supports. Work a couple of hours, 18 hours you're allowed work, 19 hours you lose it all. That's wrong. And that is trapping people in poverty and in dependence. So it has to go. We need to provide carers with certainty, with independence and with respect. So it has to go. I don't think there's any excuse for it being retained, and I hear the government saying they're looking at it. It should go. And if the message wasn't clear enough, the message was made absolutely clear by carers and people with disabilities in the recent referendum. People who didn't vote against that for regressive reasons, but voted for it because they felt the government weren't willing to give the rights to carers and people with disabilities that they deserve. That's why they voted against it, whatever people may think. I believe, by the same token, we should get rid of the means test for disability allowance. And you may say, well, oh, but there might be people on very high income with disability that would excessively benefit from doing something like that. But in truth, just like the universal payment for children's allowance, or if we get rid of the means test, as we should, for carers allowance, it is the quickest and easiest way to give the support and payment and acknowledgement to people. And if you want to claw back for a small number of people who might be on very high incomes, you can do it through the tax system. And of course, you think about the huge waste of resources in means testing. I mean, there are whole sections of government departments, multiple government departments, spend all their time means testing people. It's a waste of money, and it is a waste of resources. And indeed, we would go further, not just get rid of the means test. We think there should be a living wage for carers, and there should be a minimum decent disability payment, which disability campaigners are talking about in the arena of €350 a week. The vast majority, even those who get the payments, they are very low payments, and they are in effect below the poverty line. So it is wrong that people with disabilities, many of them, and carers, are trapped in poverty. They should have a living income, a decent living income. Why should, if we're talking about equality and so on, why should people be trapped in that situation because of disability, or because they provide care for loved ones, family members, or friends? Lastly, in 29 seconds, and slightly tangential but connected, similarly, the thresholds for medical cards need to be addressed. It's absolutely crazy that the threshold for medical card eligibility is less than the basic social welfare payment. We should, and of course the reviews of people over 70 are absolutely crazy. I recently had an example of a man over 80 who nothing had changed in his life, and he lost his medical card because of a review.
Thank you very much. We move on.